Hi and welcome back. Well, I just took a day off from coming to the boatyard yesterday and went for a bit of a drive, 2.5 hours actually, to go to a supplier of core material. And I picked up this 15mm core to do my deck. So it was worth the drive actually, because they had a lot of different samples of core. Now this is a product by Gurit and it's 15mm M80 core, they call it. But the most important thing is that the way this is presented is called contour scrim, and this is exactly identical to the style of core that was laid up before. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm not sure if you can see clearly, but this is actually cut into 20mm cubes, and then on the back there's this sort of matting. So it means that it's really flexible and hopefully will go around the curve of the deck really easily without having to put too much pressure. Now, as much as I'd really love to take a piece up on deck and start to dry fit and see how it looks, I really think I need to sort of park this for a while until I'm ready to do the deck. So for now I'll just wrap this up in some plastic to keep it dust free and put it aside until I can come back and start doing the deck properly. Okay, well overall the bottom skin of the core is dry overall. There's still one area that's got quite high moisture meetings, at least on the surface, that hasn't really dried out. And that's this part here that had all the plywood beneath the genoa track. You can actually see by the fibres here that they're actually quite swollen and they look a lot coarser than fibres in other places. And I think that's just because of the amount of moisture they've soaked up. So for this area here, I've just been heating it with a lamp to try and dry it up over a few days. Okay, good. That is dry. That is dry. So where I've had that lamp focused, that area is actually dried out now on surface, so this is working quite well just to get that last bit of moisture out. So I just need to keep on moving it up. It probably really hits an area of about 200 square millimetres, and just with my temperature sensor there, it's heating it to about 40 degrees. So I'll leave it on this section now for probably a day, come back and check that, and perhaps just keep on moving it along 200 mil at a time until the whole thing's done. Okay, let's take a look at the cap rail. So last episode I finished up by just showing a dry fit of this cap rail, and that was the finishing up point. Now all I've got here is a curved piece of wood that's cut square. This needs to end up being like an oval shape, so of course there's still a lot more work to be done here. I need to put a profile to round out the corners here and then sand it all. I need to sand the curve just to take out a few local wobbles. So there's more work to be done. So I think I'll continue to work on this cap rail for this week. I can start working on these other sections that are a little bit more complex. I've got 2 bow pieces to do here, one for each side. There's this little piece here that goes around that midship cleat. And then there are these corner pieces here and one curve that goes around the back. Okay, so more work to be done on the cap rail. This episode is probably going to be mostly about the same as last time, routing, cutting, etc. So perhaps just skip to the end if you've seen enough of that already. Cheers. Right, well I've had a little bit of a setback this week. I've been working on the templates that make up the front part of the boat, which are these ones here. And these are probably the largest pieces to make up, just so that you can sort of visualize there's 2 and they go together like that. And you can see that that sort of looks like the bow of the boat. Bow, as opposed to bow. Okay, so I went to get the piece of Iroko out and I just realised that the pieces which I'd ordered, which were 225mm across, have actually been planed down, and they've planed them by about 5mm to make them 200mm. and it's just not enough to make these sizes because it doesn't quite have the extremities of the width there. So I guess my bad for not adding an additional maybe 20 mil over to give plenty of space to work with. And I just spoke to the company and I went through the email chain, and at some point they decided to plane the sides as well as the depth. I needed the depth planed down to 33 mil, and when they did that they also planed the sides, and that's where the mistake came about. Fortunately, they're going to send me at their cost the pieces that I need to complete these sections, but unfortunately that's going to set me back by about 2 to 3 weeks. So, you know, I'd hope to sort of just get all of this done, get it ready, and then park it to install later, because there's so many incomplete projects I've got going on, and this is going to be just one more waiting for 3 weeks to get the bow pieces done. Anyway, I have to keep on moving, but that's a little bit disappointing. Well, I spent the best part of a whole day yesterday just making one piece, this piece here, which is the starboard side last piece before the stern rail comes around, which is a bit disappointing. I was hoping to have finished a lot more by now. The biggest problem I've had with this piece here is that to route out all this material here, I can't just use the fence on the routing table as I could with the longer pieces. So this has required a little bit more almost freehand. Now, I was very reluctant to get the plunge router and just start freehand cutting all this material away for two reasons. Number one, I was worried that it might dig in and sort of really pull off to one side. And number two, with freehand, I just didn't want a really wobbly line. Now, with the original Hallberg-Rassy piece, you can see by all of these marks along here, it almost looks like they've used a hole saw or some sort of round drill cutting piece to get this out, particularly around here, which surprises me a little bit because it almost indicates it's a little bit of trial and error fitting. I thought they might have had some templates made up so that they had, you know, more straight cuts. So I didn't really want to do the same thing. I wanted to have a template that I could follow to get a really nice routed line. I've achieved that, as you can see here. It's not bad, but it really did take a long time to get this right so that it would fit down flush. I was finding that it was getting stuck in pieces, and it was kind of hard to transpose this cutout onto a piece of wood. So getting back to the problem of how to remove all this material here in the middle with a plunge router, well, I've made up a template, and I'm using the template against the base of the plunge router here to guide it round so that I don't have to do it freehand. And that's basically what this is. So I'm just about to do the second piece, and I'll video that to show you how I'm doing it. But overall, the bottom line is this is taking a lot of time just to do these individual pieces. I've got a lot more to do. I've got those large bow sections. I've got these stern sections, of which I've done one. There's another sort of corner piece here for the stern section. And then there's these midship cleat parts as well. So there's two of these. All of these have got a lot of material to be taken out to create the profile. And all of these have got a bit of an ad hoc way of removing that material. As you can see here, with this piece in particular, there's just a lot of marks, circular marks, where it looks like they've used a drill to cut this channel out. I'm going to use a router, get my money's worth. Okay, the reason why it's more complex to work with these shapes, where we've got all this material to be moved in the trench, is that I actually have to do all the routing before I cut the shape out, because it's easier to work with a square piece of wood and cut that interior out and then cut the shape out. And basically I can't cut this wood to size, because with this plank I've got all sorts of pieces like this which I want to minimise the waste, so these are all interlocked, which means I can't just cut off straight pieces. So I'm working with a big piece of timber. So the first thing I'll do is just trace the outline of the piece, just to give me a guide of where this is going to lay on the piece of timber. Okay, so here's my shape of the piece. That's the rear cap rail. And then this inside line here is the line that I need to route around. So this is the guide, and this guide needs to be offset by 70 mil from where I want to cut. The 70mm takes into consideration the diameter of the base of the router and the edge of the cutting piece. So here's the shape here. I need to move this over by 70 and then clamp it down or tack it down. And that's why I've got the second piece of timber here, and that's why I've not cut the shape out yet, because it's easier to work with a square piece of timber, so I can clamp it against this, tack this guide down onto this piece of wood, which is offset by 70mm, and then start to cut out the trench here. Once the trench is cut out, then I can actually cut the outside shape out of this piece of timber, and I can do the inside trench on the routing table using the fence, because this is a fairly straight piece here. I just can't use the routing table, unfortunately, to get around these sorts of curves whilst cutting out an inside trench. Okay, I'm all set to go. I've got my guide here just lightly screwed into this second piece of waste wood. I've got everything clamped up. Just do a quick dry test to make sure everything looks right. Okay, so I'm just going to do one pass with just the tiniest cut, maybe a millimetre if that, so I can just see the outline and check that that's good before I do a deeper cut. Okay, well there's my channel, and I can see it's bang on. That's great. So I can do a couple of deep cuts into this now to get it down to 18mm is that trench. Okay, so now that I've got that initial curve, I can just remove the rest of the material in straight lines. So I've just set up this board here with various holes cut so that I can actually move this down. So I can probably just do another 2 or 3 strokes across this way, and then I'll cut out the entire shape, and I'll put it on the table to do these last bits, because I can get a really nice straight cut using the router table. Okay, well I'm going to have to leave the update here at this point, unfortunately. I was really hoping that I could finish this update showing you all the other pieces of cap rail that I'd finished, but unfortunately I wasn't able to finish them all. Doing all these other pieces of cap rail were super time consuming. I spent like 2 days just doing the one piece, and it wasn't, you know, half as efficient as doing all those long curved pieces of cap rail. So, you know, here I am, it's another week, and I've only finished well, I've got 2 more left to do. I've got the midship cleat sections left to go, but you know, it's Tuesday and I want to produce an update. I mean, I did spend 1 day last week just driving down to pick up my core, so that was a day lost there, and yesterday was a bank holiday, so I guess it's kind of been a short week. Well, just to show you these pieces that I've finished for this week, I've done basically the stern section, so this is the starboard side actually. This is the port side, and as I mentioned, I spent ages working on these, but overall I'm really pleased with them. I'm pleased with the quality of the routing and the cutouts that I've done. As you can see by the original ones, I actually think that I've done a slightly better job, or a neater job, of cutting out that trench. You know, not that it's that important, because ultimately it just goes over the cap rail and is filled with silicon anyway, but you know, it's just nice to do things properly and neatly, and I guess that's what I've done here, but the bottom line is I've spent probably too much time on these. So anyway, I'll leave the update at this point. Later this week I've got David the surveyor coming out on Thursday. Now he's going to help sound the starboard side of the deck so that I can find the delamination, and once he's done that I'll start to cut off that skin and go back to working on the deck. I think the cap rail I can just work on in the background. It won't take me that much longer to finish the midship cleats, and then in 2 or 3 weeks time I'll get the rest of the timber to do the bow section and just sandbag the rest of the cap rail, and then leave that aside for when I can fix it back on. Okay, well thank you for watching. Give us a like if you're enjoying these videos, and I'll see you next week with another update. See you then.